What if I told you that the mold growing on your food isn't always the enemy? Shocking, right? For years, we've been conditioned to panic at the sight of mold. The instinct is simple: throw it out, stay safe. But here's the twist no one talks about sometimes. That fuzzy green layer is harmless, while the foods you eat every single day might be quietly poisoning you. Think about it. Your morning coffee, a handful of peanuts, a bowl of rice, dried fruits you thought were healthy. These are the real breeding grounds for invisible toxins that can wreck your liver and even trigger cancer. Meanwhile, the mold on cheese, the one most people fear, barely touches your health at all. And here's the even scarier part. Mold isn't just about what's on your plate. It can hijack your body from the inside. It manipulates your immune system, shuts down your vitamin D defenses, and feeds off sugar cravings you thought were just a sweet tooth. Welcome to the Nutrition Institute, where we dive deep into truths most people never dare to say out loud. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover will change the way you look at food forever. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the health secrets that could save your life. Have you ever been taught to fear mold? I know I was. Growing up, whenever I saw mold on food, it was drilled into my head. Throw it away immediately. Mold is dangerous. It will make you sick. And for years, I never questioned that belief. Mold equaled poison. It was as simple as that. But then one day, I came across some surprising information that completely flipped that idea upside down. And honestly, it shocked me. Because here's the truth. Mold isn't always dangerous. In fact, sometimes the mold you see on food is practically harmless. Meanwhile, the foods you eat every single day, the ones you don't give a second thought to, can actually be far more damaging to your health. That realization made me stop and think, have I been worrying about the wrong thing this whole time? Take cheese, for example. When you see a fuzzy patch of mold on cheese, it looks gross, sure. It might even make your stomach turn, but in most cases, that kind of mold won't actually harm you. Compare that to mold that grows on peanuts, corn, rice, dried fruit, or even coffee beans. Those molds can produce toxins called mycotoxins that don't just make you feel sick in the short term, they can silently damage your liver over time. And in some cases, even raise your risk of cancer. That's a much bigger problem than a little blue-green patch on a block of cheddar. When I first learned this, I couldn't help but reflect on my own habits. I used to snack on peanuts all the time, especially the roasted ones you grab in big jars at the grocery store. I thought they were a healthy snack, full of protein, but no one ever told me they could also carry invisible fungal toxins. I remember sitting there, almost in disbelief, thinking, I've been terrified of cheese mold my whole life, while casually munching on something that could actually hurt me far more. The irony was hard to ignore, and it's not just peanuts. Coffee, something millions of us drink every morning, is also at risk. Certain molds thrive on coffee beans, and if they aren't handled properly, they can bring those same toxins into your cup. The strange thing is, we never hear warnings about this in mainstream health advice. We hear don't eat moldy bread or throw out moldy cheese, but no one ever says, be careful with your coffee beans or your dried fruit. And that silence, in a way, is what makes the danger even greater. But here's where things get even more personal. This isn't just about food. It's also about how your body reacts. A friend of mine had been dealing with constant health issues, chronic sinus infections, a white coating on his tongue, itchy rashes that came and went, and an intense craving for sweets. At first, he thought it was just bad luck, maybe allergies or just his body being sensitive. Doctors gave him antibiotics over and over again, which only helped for a short while, but then the symptoms would always come back. Eventually, he learned that these weren't random, disconnected issues. They were all signs of fungal overgrowth inside his body, and the more I looked into it, the more it made sense. Mold and yeast live inside us in tiny amounts all the time, and that's usually fine. They're harmless as long as the good bacteria in our gut keep them under control. But when that balance gets disturbed, when the bacteria are wiped out by antibiotics, or suppressed by stress, or overwhelmed by too much sugar, the fungus takes advantage. It grows, it spreads, and suddenly you're not just dealing with moldy food on your plate. You're dealing with mold inside your body. Watching my friend struggle made me realize something important. The real danger isn't just what you see on the surface. The real danger is what you don't see, the silent way mold and fungus can invade your system, feed on your sugar cravings, and make you sick without you even realizing the connection. For me, that was a turning point. I started thinking differently about my health. It wasn't enough to just avoid moldy bread or toss out a spoiled piece of fruit. I had to look deeper. What foods was I eating every day without thinking? Was I supporting the good bacteria in my body, or was I unknowingly giving fungus the upper hand? And here's the twist that really blew my mind. Sometimes the symptoms we brush off as minor annoyances, like sinus congestion, skin rashes, or that unstoppable sweet tooth, are actually clues. They're your body's way of whispering that something is off balance. In my friend's case, those cravings for sugar weren't just a lack of willpower. They were literally the fungus inside him demanding more fuel. Once he started changing his diet, cutting out refined carbs, and adding in foods that support gut health, the cravings weakened and his symptoms improved dramatically. That story hit me hard because it forced me to ask myself, how many of us are living with these subtle signs every day, ignoring them, and never realizing what's really going on? How many of us are unknowingly feeding the very thing that's making us sick? When I share this with people, they often look at me with the same surprise I had when I first learned it. Wait, so mold on cheese isn't dangerous, but my morning coffee might be. Exactly. That's the paradox. The problem isn't as black and white as we've been told. It's not about mold being always bad or always safe. It's about context where it grows, how it interacts with your body, and whether your immune system is strong enough to keep it in check. And that's what I want you to take away from this first part of the discussion. Mold is not the cartoon villain we were taught to fear. It's more complicated, more nuanced. Sometimes it's harmless. Sometimes it's toxic. And sometimes it's already living quietly inside you, waiting for the right moment to strike. The real question isn't just, is mold dangerous to eat? The real question is my body in a state where mold has the power to hurt me? For me, that realization was both unsettling and empowering. Unsettling because it made me realize I had overlooked a hidden danger for years, but empowering because it showed me that I wasn't helpless. By making better choices, supporting my gut, cutting down sugar, being mindful of what I eat, I could actually take control. So the next time you see a little mold on cheese, don't just throw it away out of fear. Think bigger. Ask yourself, what's really going on in my diet, in my gut, and in my body as a whole? Because that's where the true story of mold begins. When people hear the word mold, the instinct is to imagine something dirty, dangerous, and immediately harmful. We picture fuzzy growths on bread, damp walls in a bathroom, or spoiled fruit in the fridge. And yes, in many cases, mold can create real problems. But here's what surprised me. As I dug deeper, the true issue isn't always the mold itself. It's the environment that allows it to thrive. Inside our bodies, tiny amounts of yeast, fungus, and mold, like organisms, are present all the time. They're not invaders from the outside. They live alongside us, mostly without causing trouble. The reason they stay under control is because of the balance maintained by the trillions of bacteria in our microbiome. You can think of those bacteria as the police force of your gut, constantly patrolling, making sure no one gets out of hand. When the police are strong, mold and fungus stay in their place. But when the police are wiped out or weakened, the criminals seize the opportunity. That's when health problems begin. So, what weakens this protective force? The most obvious culprit is antibiotics. Now, don't get me wrong, antibiotics save lives. And sometimes they're absolutely necessary, but they come with a cost. They don't discriminate between harmful bacteria and the friendly bacteria in your gut. They wipe them all out. And while antibiotics don't kill fungi, they do clear away the very organisms that were holding fungi in check. The result? Fungus is suddenly free to grow without resistance. That's why so many people, after a round of antibiotics, develop issues like yeast infections, digestive problems, or recurring sinus troubles. The second big factor is steroids, particularly medications like prednisone. These drugs are often prescribed to suppress inflammation, and in critical situations, they can be life-saving. But here's the hidden danger. Steroids weaken the immune system's ability to respond. They turn off the body's alarms. So while inflammation might go down, the gates are left open and fungus or mold, like organisms, can sneak in and take over. It's like disabling a security system in your home just to stop the noise. Meanwhile, the burglars walk right through the door. And then there's stress, which many of us underestimate. Stress isn't just a mental burden, it has real biological effects. When you go through prolonged stress, like losing a loved one, dealing with a toxic workplace, or even just the chronic pressures of modern life, your body pumps out cortisol. Cortisol is your natural prednisone. You're built in steroid. And just like the prescription drug, it suppresses your immune system. That's why people under severe stress often get sick more easily, take longer to recover, or struggle with unexplained fatigue. Stress doesn't just drain your energy. It quietly lowers your defenses, making it easier for fungus and mold to spread inside you. There are other hidden contributors, too. Excess iron, for instance. It sounds harmless. Iron is a nutrient, right? But when levels are too high, especially from supplements or constant cooking in cast iron pans, it becomes food for pathogens. Fungus loves iron. Alcohol is another one. Yeast, mold, and fungus feed on it eagerly. So while that glass of wine may feel relaxing, it can also fuel the very organisms you're trying to keep under control. Even the body's pH plays a role. Fungus doesn't thrive in acidic environments, but when the body shifts toward being too alkaline, whether through diet or imbalance, the fungus digs its roots in deeper, growing stronger. And here's where things get truly unsettling. Some fungi are not just opportunistic, they're strategic. Research shows they can actually block your vitamin D receptors. Think about that. Vitamin D is crucial for immune function. It helps your body recognize and fight off intruders. But if the fungus disables your ability to use vitamin D, then, even if you're getting enough of it, your body can't activate its defenses. It's almost as if the fungus has intelligence of its own, deliberately shutting down your weapons so it can survive. That realization floored me. It made me wonder, how many people are struggling with low vitamin D symptoms? Not because they aren't taking enough, but because their body simply can't use it. When I put all these pieces together, the bigger picture became clear. Mold isn't the lone villain we imagine it to be. It's not always about exposure from food or the environment. It's about the conditions inside the body that either keep it controlled or let it take over. Antibiotics, steroids, stress, excess iron, alcohol, pH imbalance, all of these tip the scales in favor of fungal overgrowth. This leads to a powerful but uncomfortable conclusion. The enemy isn't mold itself. The enemy is imbalance. If your microbiome is strong, if your immune system is resilient, mold has very little power over you. But if those defenses are compromised, mold doesn't just become a nuisance, it becomes an invader, exploiting every weakness. Now, some people push back when they hear this. They'll say, but isn't mold toxic on its own? Don't we need to avoid it at all costs? And yes, there are toxic molds out there, especially those producing mycotoxins in foods like grains, nuts, and coffee. But even then, the level of harm depends on how your body is prepared to handle them. Two people can eat the same food. One gets sick, while the other feels fine. The difference isn't the mold, it's the host. That's why I've come to see mold not just as an outside threat, but as a mirror. It reflects what's happening inside. If you find yourself constantly battling sinus infections, unexplained rashes, digestive issues, or endless sugar cravings, it may not be just bad luck. It may be a signal that your body's inner ecosystem is out of balance, giving fungus more power than it should have. The real challenge, then, isn't to live in fear of moldy cheese or obsessively scrub every corner of your kitchen. The challenge is to build a resilient internal environment where mold has no foothold. That shift in perspective changes everything. It's no longer about running from the enemy. It's about strengthening yourself so the enemy never gets the chance to win. For me, this reframing was both eye-opening and liberating. It meant I didn't have to live in fear of every possible exposure. I could focus instead on supporting my body, reducing stress, avoiding unnecessary antibiotics, being cautious with steroids, and paying attention to what fuels or weakens my microbiome. Mold wasn't some unstoppable monster. It was just a symptom of imbalance. And balance was something I could actively work toward. So, the next time someone asks me, is mold dangerous to eat? My answer isn't a simple yes or no. My answer is, it depends what shape is your body in. Because at the end of the day, mold is only as powerful as the environment you give it. And that, more than anything, is what determines the outcome. By the time I realized that mold was less about the food itself and more about the balance inside my body, a new question naturally followed. What can we actually do about it? It's one thing to understand that imbalance opens the door for fungus and mold, but how do we close that door again? How do we build resilience so mold never has the chance to take over? The first step, I discovered, isn't about chasing mold away. It's about strengthening the body so mold has no real opportunity to thrive. Think of it like gardening. If you want to prevent weeds, you don't just pull them out one by one forever. You enrich the soil. You plant healthy crops. You make sure the environment is so strong that weeds simply don't stand a chance. Our microbiome works the same way. One of the simplest, yet most powerful, tools is nutrition. Probiotic foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, and other fermented vegetables can bring beneficial bacteria back into your gut. These bacteria are the police officers we talked about earlier. They keep the fungus under control. Every time you eat probiotic-rich foods, you're essentially calling in reinforcements for your internal defense system, and the more diverse your gut bacteria, the harder it becomes for mold or yeast to dominate. Next comes detox support. If mold toxins are already in your body, you need a way to help your system neutralize and remove them. This is where activated charcoal and bentonite clay come in. They work like sponges, binding to toxins in your digestive tract so they can be carried out safely. I was skeptical about these at first, but after trying activated charcoal during a period when I suspected mold exposure, I was amazed at how much better I felt within just a few days. It was as if my body had been carrying a silent weight, and suddenly that weight was lifted. Chlorophyllin, a form of chlorophyll, is another tool worth mentioning. It's found in liquid supplements and has the ability to neutralize certain toxins, acting almost like a shield. Then there are cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale, which contain compounds like sulforaphane. These don't just help the body detoxify. They also directly support the liver, which is your main line of defense against any kind of toxin, including those from mold. Speaking of liver support, NAC and Hastelstein is another supplement that caught my attention. It helps replenish glutathione, one of the body's most powerful antioxidants, and it plays a crucial role in detoxifying harmful substances. When I started including more of these foods and supplements, I noticed a tangible difference in my energy levels. Instead of feeling drained and foggy, I felt clearer, lighter, and more resilient. But strengthening the immune system is just as important as detoxifying. Mold thrives when your defenses are weak. So giving your body the tools it needs to fight back is essential. Vitamin D is at the top of that list, but as we learned, it needs partners to work effectively. Taking vitamin D along with magnesium, vitamin K2, and zinc ensures that it's absorbed and activated properly. And let's not forget selenium, another trace mineral that many people overlook. Without enough selenium, your immune system simply cannot function at full strength. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that many of these solutions aren't exotic or out of reach. They're simple nutrients, some found in everyday foods, others in basic supplements that collectively create a strong shield. And once I started focusing on this, my mindset shifted. Instead of worrying about where mold might be hiding, I began to feel empowered because I knew my body was better equipped to handle it. Another fascinating discovery was propolis, a substance made by bees. Propolis has been used for centuries as a natural antimicrobial, and modern research shows it has both antifungal and immune regulating properties. When I added it into my routine, I noticed fewer seasonal illnesses and a general sense of being more resilient. It felt like nature had given us a gift, something bees had been making all along that just happens to protect us in the fight against fungus. Then there's MCT oil, derived from coconuts. The lauric acid in it has antifungal properties, but beyond that, it also provides clean energy for the body. I began adding MCT oil to my morning coffee, not just for the energy boost, but because I knew it was quietly working to create an environment less welcoming to fungus. Of course, lifestyle plays a huge role too. Managing stress is non-negotiable. If stress can weaken the immune system as much as antibiotics or steroids, then learning how to relax, meditate, or simply slow down isn't just about mental health, it's physical protection. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. For years, I thought I could just power through stressful periods without consequence. But my body always told the truth. Fatigue, recurring infections, and even skin flare-ups would remind me that balance wasn't optional. And that's the heart of the message I want to share here. Mold isn't just a food problem. It's not just about avoiding spoiled bread or tossing out moldy fruit. It's a whole body issue. It's about how we live, what we eat, how we handle stress, and how we support our inner defenses. When I connected all these dots, I saw mold differently. It stopped being an external enemy and became more of a test, an indicator of whether my body was strong or vulnerable. So where does this leave us? For me, it leaves a sense of responsibility, but also hope. Responsibility because I know my choices matter. Hope because I've seen how powerful even small changes can be. Eating more fermented foods, taking the right nutrients, lowering stress, it all adds up. And over time, it builds a body that mold simply can't take advantage of. Now, I want to leave you with a question. Have you ever noticed recurring issues like constant sugar cravings, unexplained fatigue, or skin rashes and brushed them off as just normal? What if they were actually signals from your body that mold and fungus are gaining the upper hand? Think about it and share your experience in the comments below, because the more we talk about this, the more we learn from each other. After everything I've learned and shared with you, one truth stands out more than anything. Mold is not the real enemy. Imbalance is. For years, I carried the belief that mold itself was this terrifying invader that had to be avoided at all costs. But now I see it differently. Mold is more like a test, a reflection of the state of your body. If your inner defenses are strong, it has no power. But if your microbiome is weakened, if your immune system is compromised, if stress has drained your reserves, then mold has the perfect opening to take over. That realization completely shifted how I approach my own health. Instead of obsessively trying to eliminate every possible exposure, I began focusing on building resilience. I added probiotic foods to my diet, not just as a trend, but because I understood that those living bacteria are my body's police force. I paid attention to nutrients like vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, and selenium, not just numbers on a blood test, but as tools to keep my immune system sharp. I discovered the quiet power of cruciferous vegetables, NAC, propolis, and even MCT oil. And, maybe most importantly, I learned to respect stress as more than an emotional challenge. It's a physical one too. Managing it became part of my health strategy. What I found is that these changes aren't complicated or out of reach. They're small, consistent steps anyone can take. And over time, they build something incredibly valuable. A body that is less reactive, more balanced, and harder for mold or fungus to exploit. That's the kind of strength we all deserve. The deeper lesson for me, though, goes beyond mold itself. It's about ownership. Too often, we're taught to fear things outside of us, whether it's food, germs, or the environment, while forgetting the power we hold inside. Mold reminded me that I'm not helpless. My choices, my habits, my lifestyle, they all matter. And when I choose balance, when I choose to support my body rather than tear it down, I take back control. So here's my personal takeaway, and the message I want to leave you with. Don't just fight what's out there. Strengthen what's in here. Because when your inner world is balanced, the outer threats lose their power. Now, I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with symptoms like constant sugar cravings, fatigue, or recurring sinus infections, and wondered if something deeper might be going on? I'd love for you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, because your story might help someone else connect the dots in their own life. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps this channel alive and gives me the motivation to keep bringing you more insights, more tools, and more ways to take back your health. Together, we can build stronger, healthier lives, one choice at a time.